Hey everyone, I'm using Voyant to look at the text of The Crying of Lot 49 and diving right into things. Oedipa was the top word in the text at 283 uses. I was kind of surprised that she was number one. I figured she would pop up frequently in the text, but I thought the top word would have been something like Tristero or something relating to paranoia or conspiracy, perhaps something to do with the male. The frequency in which Oedipa's name is used in the text could function as a sort of subconscious reminder to the reader that, hey, we're tied to Oedipa, we're tied to Oedipa's perspective. If Oedipa is paranoid and believes a member from Tristero is following her, then we as readers are forced to go along with that reality, so we are bound to her perspective. Also, Oedipa's name could function as a sort of subtle chant throughout the text. It reminds me of Ndondololo's White Noise, the chant of Toyota Silica over and over. And obviously this would be a lot more sparse, but I think it could perform a similar function. And perhaps Oedipa is the only constant within the text. You know, we go back and forth with Tristero. There's so much ambiguity all the way around. Her doctor is unreliable and eventually is arrested because he goes insane. However, Oedipa remains the constant throughout this text. Even if her perceptions are unreliable, we are bound to her for perspective. The next word coming in at a close second is said. In many ways, I feel that this speaks to the novel's emphasis on the theme of communication, particularly communication in the form of exchanging knowledge. Oedipa moves from source to source trying to obtain any scrap of information she can about Tristero, but the irony here is that a lot of the information is ultimately useless, or could at least be perceived as useless because of the ambiguous nature of the text. We really don't know at the end of the book if the information she has been given means anything or not, if it possesses any significance. Despite Oedipus searching, she never uncovers the whole mystery of Tristero, and I believe the implication at the end of the novel is that if she does meet the bidder of Lot 49, that bidder will only raise more questions and only uncover small bits of the mystery. I don't think that would have been an ultimate answer to Tristero. So after the first two words, we have a major drop-off, but our third word is like. As you can see on the right, like is generally used in descriptions, like Jack, like all things, a stranger like himself, and that reminded me of some of the postmodern critics that we discussed in class, particularly Walter Benjamin, and the idea that something loses its aura because it has been copied and reproduced so many times. So instead of having the real thing, we have copies. It's like something. We don't have originals. I pulled up some more examples on the right, like the second world or like a large bird. This also reminds me of Jean Baudrillard's idea of simulations, or that we don't have new ideas, we just have copies. Instead of, in The Crying of Lot 49, instead of things simply being original or like themselves, they always resemble something else. They always possess traits of something else, and therefore they are not wholly original. It's also interesting the way that Pynchon uses the word like to dance around the idea of his objects. Instead of stating what they are, he states what they resemble, almost as if we can't really know the object or the acts that he is describing. This reminds me of the idea of slippage within language, or of a broken language, because we can never find the chair or the ultimate chair, just as in Pynchon's descriptions we can never find the ultimate image. I was fairly surprised also to see the word Metzger pop up as much as it does in The Crying of Lot 49, particularly because he seems absent for so much of the text. However, when he does appear in the text, he seems present in a way that many of the other characters are not. A lot of these characters sort of recede into the background, like Mucho Mas, Dr. Hilarious, at least until he goes insane. But the night that Oedipus spends with Metzger in the hotel is probably one of the most vivid passages in the book. This is also one of the few points in the text when Oedipus actually has some form of intimacy with another human being, including that of her husband. Mucho is not really in the text a lot. So it's interesting that Oedipus is more open to a stranger than she is with her own husband. Perhaps this is because the scene in the hotel with Metzger blurs the lines somewhat between what is reality within the text and what's going on the screen in the television in their room. Metzger sings along with the child version of himself. He blurs the lines between television and then reality within the crying of Lot 49. In that sense, Metzger could be seen as some form of advertisement that's in the consumer culture. He could be seen as this image of perfection that is presented through the media as something that the average person should strive for, and perhaps that's why Oedipus feels attracted to him, because Metzger is possibly the embodiment of this sort of advertisement culture. And finally, we have the word no, which in some ways is very ironic because this is a very ambiguous text. We can't, as readers, we don't really know a lot at the end of the novel. The use of the word no also most likely speaks to Oedipus' quest for knowledge throughout the text, her quest for the truth about Trastero. But it's interesting because for so much of the text she is questioning up through the very last page. She doesn't actually know. It's not a definite. So when I looked at specific examples in the text, I found that a lot of it was the language was negative. It's what she doesn't know. She doesn't know how to tell the firm in LA. She doesn't know where to begin. Here's an example of where she'll never know. So in that sense, the text focuses on what we don't have instead of what we have. And that's an idea that keeps recurring throughout the novel. If you look at the very end, during the auction, Oedipus doesn't have the information about Trastero. She doesn't have all of it. She doesn't know who the bidder is. It's all about what Oedipus and what we as readers don't know and what we don't have in the text. This could also reflect the consumer culture as well, because consumer culture and advertisements also play off of what their customers don't have. They don't make money if people already have that. So that could also play into it. And I also thought it was interesting that Trastero is not used all that much. Here it is, and I think 33 uses. That could also speak to the shadowy or ambiguous nature, the secretive nature of the organization, that it's not even really in the crying of Lot 49 in the text as much. But I was surprised that Trastero was not used as a word more. And that's it. Thank you, everybody.